I knew something was wrong the moment my son closed the door, but I did not expect to hear the lock turn. That sharp metallic click did not belong to a mother's bedroom. It belonged to a storage shed, a cellar, a place meant to keep things contained, not people, and certainly not me. Mason did not hesitate. His hand didn't tremble. Mine did. "Mom, it's just for tonight," he said, slipping my keys into the pocket of his dark jacket, as if they had always belonged there. "You get disoriented when it's late. I don't want you wandering and hurting yourself." At 75, I have heard many lies, some clumsy, some cruel, but none delivered as calmly as that one. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall of the home I had lived in for nearly half a century. Ravenshore Valley stretched quietly outside my window, a vast sweep of land breathing under the cold night air. My husband and I had restored this valley with our own hands. We cleared the bramble, rebuilt the old stone walls, planted the pines that now towered like sentinels in the moonlight. We gave our youth to this land. It grew because we did. But tonight, the valley didn't feel like mine at all. A floorboard groaned beneath Mason's weight as he moved through the living room. Then another. I could picture him opening drawers, lifting stacks of letters, sifting through the carefully organized shelves of my life. He thought I didn't know what he was searching for. He thought I didn't know him anymore. The old wooden beams of the house creaked as the night temperature dropped, the sound so familiar it should have soothed me. Instead, it felt like a warning. I walked to the bedroom door, even though I knew it was locked. The knob refused to turn, cold in my hand. Locked in my own home by my own child. It is a strange thing. Realizing someone you raised with tenderness can one day look at you and see not a person, but an obstacle, a complication, a barrier to a plan they believe is more important than your dignity. I pressed my palm against the door, steadying myself. My husband used to sand this frame every spring so it would never jam. "A good door," he'd say, "protects, but never traps." How he would have hated tonight. Downstairs, something metal clattered. Mason pulling open the old file cabinet. Papers rustled. A drawer slammed shut with growing impatience. He believed the deed would be there. He believed everything he needed was within reach. He was wrong. People think age makes you fragile, but years sharpen the instincts. Silence becomes an ally. Stillness becomes strategy. I returned to my bed, back straight, heart steady. Mason thought he had trapped me, but long before this night, I had already prepared for the very moment he did the unthinkable. And by morning, he would learn a truth he never expected. The house settled into its nighttime rhythm, that slow, familiar breathing of timber and stone that had carried me through so many seasons. I wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders and let my eyes fall toward the window. The valley beyond glowed under the moon, silver and still, like a memory trying to speak. Ravenshore Valley had never been generous to strangers, but it had embraced us, me and my husband Daniel, from the very beginning. We were young then, foolish in the way only dreamers can be. We bought the land when it was nothing but a tangle of weeds and broken fences. The neighbors laughed, calling it a graveyard for ambition. But Daniel only smiled. "Land remembers who works for it," he told me. "It pays you back in time." And it did. We rebuilt the barn with our bare hands, fitted new stone into the hearth, planted acres of willow and cedar. On summer nights we slept on the porch, listening to coyotes cry in the distance. Every inch of this place held our fingerprints. So how strange it was to sit here now, locked in my own bedroom, while the boy I had raised tore through the remnants of our life's work like a stranger searching through ashes. When Mason was little, He used to follow Daniel everywhere, trailing him with a toy hammer and muddy boots. He named the pines after superheroes, insisted the pond was his personal kingdom, declared he would never live anywhere but Ravenshore. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, that boy disappeared. He grew fast, too fast, into a man who chased the world instead of grounding himself in it. Real estate, investments, numbers that rose and fell like tides he believed he could control. As the pressure grew, so did the distance. He stopped visiting unless he needed something. He stopped listening unless he was the one speaking. He stopped seeing the land as home and started seeing it as value. I should have known then. The shift was not sudden. It was slow erosion, rain eating away at rock. My reflection in the darkened window startled me. I looked older tonight than I had yesterday, not because of the years, but because of the truth settling over me like frost. At what point had my son begun to believe he was entitled to rearrange my life? A thud echoed through the floorboards, a drawer slamming, Mason muttering under his breath. He was running out of patience, searching with the fury of a man already drowning and looking for something solid to cling to. He thought the documents, the deed, the land rights, were the solid ground he needed. He couldn't imagine I had moved them years ago, not out of paranoia, but out of wisdom earned from loving a land that demanded foresight. People think controlling behavior starts with anger. It doesn't. It starts with concern. Concern that grows claws. My son believed he was protecting me from myself. But the truth was simpler, colder. He was protecting his plans, and he was willing to sacrifice me to save them. The night stretched thin, as if Ravenshore Valley itself were holding its breath. I stayed in my chair, listening as Mason moved from frustration into something sharper. His footsteps grew heavier, more erratic, pacing from room to room like a man hunting a phantom he was certain existed. A muffled clang echoed through the floorboards. He had found the old metal hatch near the living room vent. I closed my eyes. I could picture him crouched over it, prying at the latch, convinced he was seconds away from discovering the treasure chest of documents he imagined I had foolishly hidden in plain sight. Another clang, then a muttered curse. That hatch had held nothing for years. I made sure of that. Mason's impatience traveled up the walls, settling like a vibration in my bones. He tore through closets, upended baskets, pushed furniture aside. Papers whispered as he sifted them, his breathing growing more and more ragged. I had heard that sound before, not from him, but from the wolves that used to circle the barn at night. Desperation always reveals itself in breath. He thinks he is running out of time, I thought. He was. Another drawer opened violently. A cabinet door slammed. The thud of something heavy, likely the filing cabinet, being dragged across the floor reached my ears. "Might as well give up," he growled under his breath. "Nothing is ever where it should be in this house." It wasn't disorder that frustrated him. It was the realization that his assumptions were wrong. He believed I lived passively, anxiously, unaware of how the world worked. He believed old age meant surrender. He didn't understand that solitude sharpens the mind, that widows learn to prepare, that the land had taught me vigilance long before age taught me caution. I stood and crossed the room to the far corner where my husband once installed a narrow vent for winter heat. I pressed my fingers gently against the wall, tracing the grain of the cedar panel. The secret compartment behind it held the only documents that mattered. Not on paper Mason had touched. Not in the safe he was trying to crack open downstairs. Certainly not in the obvious places a desperate man would dig through. No, the truth was buried deeper, protected long before tonight. Years ago, after Daniel's death, an attorney named Marin Clyde urged me to secure Ravenshore Valley in a way no one could manipulate. She had seen too many elders pressured out of their homes by family who loved the property more than the person. Her voice came back to me now, steady and uncompromising. "You cannot predict people's intentions," she warned, "but you can prepare for their choices." So I did. The legal owner of Ravenshore Valley was not Evelyn Hartman in any straightforward sense. The deed had been transferred into a protected conservation trust under an alias known only to me, Marin, and the Forest Registry Board. Mason could scour the house until dawn. He could pry open every drawer, every hinge, every forgotten corner. He would still find nothing, because what he was hunting for no longer lived in this house. It lived in the law. And in the morning, that truth would be the one thing he could not control. The lock slid back at dawn, not gently, not respectfully. It turned with the clipped impatience of a man who believed a night's sleep would soften a mother's resolve. The door opened only a few inches, enough for Mason to peer in, not enough for him to step inside. "Morning, Mom," he said brightly, the kind of forced cheerfulness people use when they're about to deliver bad news and call it a blessing. "Did you rest?" I looked at him the way one looks at a stranger wearing a familiar face. "I rested enough." He nodded quickly, not truly hearing me. "Good. We've got a lot to go over." He stepped aside, gesturing down the hallway as though I were a guest he needed to escort out of a hotel suite. I walked slowly, not because of age, but because dignity is not something I hurry. The kitchen table had been transformed into something resembling a negotiation site. Neat stacks of papers, thin folders, clipped pages, a pen placed perfectly parallel to the table's edge. My coffee mug had been pushed aside to make room. He was already waiting for me at the table, one hand resting on the papers, the other tapping anxiously. "Mom," he began, straightening the top packet, "I've organized everything to help us take the next step. We need to be realistic about the future." "Whose future?" I asked quietly. He didn't blink. "Ours." He slid the first document to me, a gleaming white form filled with highlighted fields. "This is the preliminary authorization for the Ravenshore appraisal," he said. "It doesn't commit you to selling. It simply lets the appraiser access the property and begin valuation." "I never approved an appraisal," I replied. "You don't need to," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "As the family representative, Who appointed you that?" He hesitated. "The form requires a representative," he said. "I put my name because I'm your son." "Being my son does not grant you legal authority," I replied, calm as still water. His jaw tightened. "Mom, don't start getting technical. This is standard. The real estate market is shifting fast. We need to act before values drop." "You spoke to a buyer," I said. He froze. "How do you—" "You scheduled an appraisal before speaking to me," I continued. "You decided the outcome before asking my thoughts." His mask slipped. For a second, I saw the raw nerves beneath the polished exterior. "I'm trying to help you," he insisted. "This land is too much for you. You're 75, Mom. You can't keep maintaining a property this size." "I've maintained it longer than you've held a job," I said. Color rose in his cheeks. "That's not fair." "What's unfair," I replied softly, "is assuming I am incapable simply because it benefits your plan." He looked away, lips pressed tight. I rested my hand lightly on the top document. "You filled this out yourself yesterday." He stiffened. "So? The form needed to be prepared." "It is not a standard form," I said. "It's a document you wrote, Mason. You expected me to sign without reading." He looked genuinely offended. "Mom, I would never trick you." "You locked me in my room," I answered. Silence. He swallowed. "That was for your safety." "No," I said. "It was for your convenience." His eyes flashed, defensive now. "You don't understand how serious this is. I have meetings, deadlines, bills. This property could solve. There it is, I murmured. He stopped. He realized too late he had said the one truth he shouldn't have. This isn't about my future, I said. It's about rescuing yours. He shook his head rapidly. No, Mom, don't twist this. I'm trying to secure a better life for both of us. You scheduled a buyer, I repeated. Before you spoke to me. He clenched his hands, knuckles white. You don't know everything. I know more than you think, I said, reaching for the folder I had brought quietly from my bedroom. His eyes followed my every movement. You should have read the county records, I said gently. Or the trust filings. What filings? He breathed. I opened the folder and turned it toward him. Slowly, deliberately. The first page shone under the morning light. A conservation trust deed with my alias, notarized years ago, listing Ravenshore Valley as a protected sanctuary. Mason's face drained of color. This cannot be real, he whispered. It is, I said. You don't have this kind of authority. I prepared, I answered, long before you decided to prepare for me. He stared at the document, the realization carving across his features like a cold wind. You cannot sell this land, I said softly. Not with a pen. Not with pressure. Not with a lock on my door. His breath hitched. Shallow. Disbelieving. And for the first time since last night, Mason understood. He did not have control. He never had. A sharp knock broke the silence. Not tentative. Not timid. A firm, confident knock that did not belong to someone unsure of their place in this home. Mason straightened abruptly, panic flickering across his features before he masked it. Stay here, he muttered, pushing back from the table. But I rose as well. I may have been locked in my room last night, yet I would not be locked out of my own doorway this morning. He opened the front door only a crack, just enough to peer outside. What are you doing here? He hissed. A familiar voice answered, clear and worried. Mom said you were both here. I didn't hear from Grandma last night. I came to check on her. My granddaughter. Lila stepped inside before Mason could stop her, slipping through the narrow opening like sunlight through a curtain. Her paramedic jacket hung loosely over her shoulders, her hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes sharp with instinct. The moment she saw me, her expression changed. Grandma, she breathed, hurrying toward me. I called and texted. You never answered. Are you okay? I touched her arm. I'm all right now. Mason shut the door behind her with unnecessary force. We're having a private discussion, he said sharply. You shouldn't be here. Lila ignored him. She had the same ability her grandfather once had, the ability to see truth instantly, without needing it explained. Her gaze swept the room, from the folders on the table, to Mason's stiff posture, to my composed but tired face. What happened? She asked quietly. Nothing happened, Mason snapped. Grandma is just confused about a few things. I'm trying to help her. Lila's eyebrows rose slowly. Confused? She's overwhelmed, he continued. I'm handling everything. I inhaled, steady and deep. It was time. He locked me in my bedroom last night, I said. Lila froze. The color drained from her cheeks. Replaced almost instantly by a fierce anger I had only seen in her when comforting victims on emergency calls. She turned to Mason. You what? Mason held up his hands. Don't dramatize. Answer the question, she demanded. It wasn't like that, he insisted. I was protecting her. She gets confused at night. No, Lila said, voice low and trembling with fury. You don't protect someone by locking them up. Her breathing grew sharp. Mason, are you out of your mind? Lila, stay out of this, he warned. This is between Mom and me. She stepped closer, squaring herself between us. No, it stopped being just between you two the moment you crossed a line. Grandma, did he take anything else? My keys, I said. My phone. Lila spun back to Mason. Oh my God, you didn't. He ran a hand through his hair. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, she said. You tried to control her. You tried to isolate her. That's abuse, Mason. His face flushed crimson. How dare you? How dare you? Lila shot back. You think because she's 75 she can't make decisions? She's clearer than you are right now. Mason's mouth opened, but no words came out. Lila turned to me, her voice softening. Grandma, I'm here. Whatever happens next, I'm not leaving you alone with this. Behind her, Mason's expression tightened, not with guilt, but with fear. The kind of fear a man feels when the truth finds its witness. His plan was no longer just collapsing. It had been exposed. The room held its breath. Even the walls seemed to fall into a heavy silence, as if Ravenshore itself were leaning in to watch what happened next. Mason sank into the nearest chair, rubbing his temples as though the weight of the unfolding truth pressed down on him. Lila stood between us, arms crossed, every line in her posture radiating firm, unwavering protection. Grandma, she said quietly, there's more, isn't there? I nodded. Mason lifted his head sharply. What more? His voice cracked, not with anger this time, but with something that sounded dangerously close to fear. I walked slowly toward the living room. The wooden floor creaked under my steps. I knelt beside the old braided rug Daniel and I bought the first year we moved to Ravenshore. Lifting the edge, I found the seam of the floorboard, subtle, nearly invisible. Mason's breath caught. No, he whispered. There's nothing there. I checked. You checked where you thought I would hide things, I replied. I lifted the board with a soft groan of wood. Beneath it lay the cedar chest, its surface smooth, polished by decades of care. Mason inhaled sharply, as if he were seeing a ghost. You kept that? He breathed. Of course, I said. It contains everything you hoped to find last night. Lila stepped closer, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and dread. I opened the chest. Inside, wrapped in linen, lay the trust documents, the real ones. The papers were thick, crisp, sealed with legal notations that meant far more than the flimsy sale forms Mason had typed himself. I set the first document on the coffee table. Lila leaned in. Mason didn't move. This, I said softly, is the conservation trust deed. I saw that, Mason muttered. It doesn't mean... It's not the important part, I interrupted. I unfolded the second document. Mason's eyes followed, widening with every line. This, I continued, tapping the notarized section, is the automatic revocation clause. The what? Lila asked. I looked at her gently. The clause my attorney insisted on. It states that if any family member attempts to coerce, manipulate, or force me into relocation or property decisions, they are immediately removed from the trust. Silence crashed through the room. Mason stared at the page as if it were a sentence written in fire. That's not legal, he whispered. It can't be legal. It is, I said calmly, and it is enforceable. His breath hitched. His shoulders shook. But I didn't... You locked me in my room, I reminded him. You took my keys. You attempted to access protected documents. Mason, your actions triggered the clause. He looked at Lila desperately, pleading without words. But Lila stepped back. Mom, she whispered, what did you do? He shook his head violently. No, this isn't happening. You can't cut me out. I'm your son. I placed the final document on the table. And this, I said, is the federal wildlife designation. Ravenshore Valley isn't just a trust. It's a protected sanctuary. Any attempt to sell or develop it without proper authorization is a federal offense. Mason's face went white. You didn't just lose your claim to the land, I said gently. You put yourself in danger of far worse. And for the first time in years, he understood he had finally pushed too far, and the land he tried to take had pushed back. Mason sank back into the chair as though the weight of the entire valley had fallen onto his shoulders. His mouth opened, shut, then opened again. But no sound came out. He looked like a man who had just discovered the ground beneath him was not ground at all, only ice, thin and breaking. Mom, he whispered finally, not to Lila, not to himself, but to me. His voice trembled with something I had not heard from him since he was a child. Fear. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You meant for enough, I replied. He flinched as if struck. Lila stood beside me now, arms firmly folded, but her eyes softened. Not with forgiveness, but with a grief only family can feel. You crossed every line, she said quietly. Grandma gave you a chance to talk. You didn't talk, you took. Mason buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook once, a small, involuntary quake. You don't understand, he muttered. I'm drowning. I thought I could fix everything if I just had control. Control, that word again, the word that had carried him all the way to this moment, this collapse. I lowered myself onto the opposite chair, steady despite the ache in my knees. Mason, I said gently, you've been drowning for a long time, but you never once reached for help. You reached for resources, for shortcuts, for escape routes, but not for me, not for love. His hands dropped to the table, palms trembling. I thought if I told you how bad things were, you'd think I'd failed. You failed, I said, because you couldn't face the truth. Not because you lacked money, but because you lacked honesty. His eyes filled. Anger first, then shame, then something much harder to witness. Understanding. I can fix this, he said suddenly, voice rising with panic. Just tell your lawyer, tell the board. It was all a misunderstanding. Tell them you weren't coerced. I shook my head. I won't lie for you, I said. Protecting you is not the same as enabling you. A faint, sharp gasp escaped him. But I'm your son. And I am your mother, I answered softly. Not your shield. The cold truth settled between us like dust. Lila stepped forward, her voice steady. Mason, you need to leave. He stared at her, stunned. You're taking her side? I'm taking the side of what's right, she replied. And right now, that's Grandma. He pushed back from the table abruptly, the chair scraping across the floor. His breathing unraveled, short, shallow bursts of disbelief. This isn't over, he whispered, though even he seemed uncertain who he was threatening, me, the land, or his own denial. No, I said softly. It isn't over, but the part where you're welcome here is. The finality of it landed like a stone. Lila guided him toward the front door, not roughly, but with firm, unyielding purpose. On the porch, he paused, gripping the railing as though it were the last solid thing in his collapsing world. Mom, he whispered again, voice breaking. I met his gaze. I hope you find your way, I said, but you won't find it by taking mine. The door closed gently, not slammed, not forced, just closed, a clean, painful ending to a chapter that had lingered too long. Inside the quiet house, I dialed my attorney. My voice didn't shake. Document the coercion event, I said, And activate all protections. When I hung up, Lila stood beside me. You did the right thing, she said softly. For the first time in days, I felt my breath steady, sis. I finally did, I replied, and the valley outside exhaled with me. The sun slipped lower in the sky as evening settled over Ravenshore Valley, painting the fields in soft gold. A quiet calm filled the house, not the silence of fear or tension, but the kind that comes when something wounded has finally begun to heal. I stepped outside onto the porch, letting the cool air brush against my skin. The pines we planted decades ago swayed gently, whispering through their needles like old friends, welcoming me back. For the first time in a long while, I felt the land breathing with me instead of bracing against intrusion. I walked slowly along the footpath Daniel built by hand, each stone a memory, each curve a reminder of love shaped with purpose. The valley had weathered storms, winters, droughts, but it had never turned its back on me. People sometimes do. Land does not. Behind me, the porch light clicked on. Lila stepped outside, her footsteps soft, her presence warm. You okay, Grandma? She asked. I nodded. Better than I've been in years. She joined me on the path, linking her arm with mine. Mom will call eventually, she said quietly. I know, I replied. But when she does, I'll be ready. And she will be too. We paused at the edge of the meadow. Fireflies began to rise from the tall grass, tiny lanterns flickering against the darkening sky. Lila smiled. It's beautiful here. It always was, I said. I just needed space to see it again. For a long moment, we stood together in the peaceful glow. Then the truth settled into words. Simple, steady, earned. Lila, I said, freedom is not taken from you. You surrender it when you stop protecting it. She squeezed my arm gently, and the valley, strong and quiet, seemed to agree.